Then, minutes of swift gliding through the waves brought us to the weir. That is a trap in which the fish are caught. The adventure of it and the expectation of what's to be was always there.
Trap fishing, planting poles and stringing net to catch fish, has existed for almost as long as people have watched fish swim. People didn't need to go far offshore or even scour the bottom. What they needed was an understanding of where they lived. They needed to know where fish passed through, how the currents carried them, and then it was left to hard work, patience, hope, and the traps. This was a passive way to fish. It took what came rather than chased what was far beyond. It was safer, close to home, and it didn't rip up and wipe out the fertile ocean floor. It was a way of life that for generations powered the economy of seaside places like Cape Cod, inspiring great painters. And to many, it also was symbolic of an intimate, less destructive relationship to the shore and the sea. But we're talking about trap fishing as if it belongs to the past. There are still people in our fishing communities who believe in it and carry on the tradition. Mark Simonich from Chatham has been trap fishing for much of his adult life. And for the past few seasons, his son, Peter Risen, has joined him on the crew. That means a lot for a family, and it means a lot of hard work now, before the fishing season begins.
Get to work. Get rid of these poles while we got a chance.
For Mark, the crucial first step takes him far off the water on a trip to New Hampshire. What would a Cape Cod fisherman need up there? Well, a Cape Cod trap fisherman needs poles, and not just any poles.
To operate these fish traps, we need hickory poles, hickory trees. So what we're going to be looking for today specifically are poles, are trees, which will, when cut, will yield a pole 38 to 45 feet. The poles have to have a maximum butt diameter across the bottom of no more than 6 inches. And after 45 inches, we hope to see them taper to about 2 inches. So it's really a very specific shaped tree. When these poles go down, the amount of flotation, buoyancy, the positive buoyancy in the dried out pole won't pop the pole back out of the water. What you do on the stern is you put the butt right over the stern, right here. The biggest poles have to be able to be picked up by 2 people. That is the big fat end, put on their shoulders, dragged down to the beach to the boat, and then pushed aboard. So hickory fulfills this flexibility. They'll lay way over without breaking. They're very dense. After 20 years, the pole can still be used if it survived that long. In the 100 poles that we use per trap, in that, we have about 50 in a line, and then we have what we call a heart, like that, and then we have a bowl that comes around like that. We want to catch certain kinds of fish. Those kinds of fish have these common characteristics. They have this heavy schooling instinct, and they move. So the fish come up the leader, moving kind of slowly. They don't want to go through this obstacle. They could. The fish will enter in here, we presume. And this intermediate stage, that being the leader, this being the heart, this being the bowl, 3 stages. In this intermediate stage, the heart, you can see a half a heart here, like this. There's the other half, like this. This takes advantage of their behavior in the school. The fish will enter here, Between these two poles, we call them the mouth poles. Cape Cod Bay, they call them the gate. Now the question everyone likes to ask all the time, well, is this open all the time? Yeah, it's open all the time, night and day, 24 hours. The only time we close it is when we go to take the fish out of it. We want this area in here to keep this shape. We do not want the wind or the tide to move this twine back and forth. So every time we go to leave a trap, we make sure these are tied very tightly. And the dory man, the skiff man, takes one side of the trap and ties these up. The boat gets on this side and pulls it back with the winch head. At any rate, we get this thing tied down.
The coming season has a special significance for these two. Peter, Mark's son, wants to take over the business and carry on, but they aren't sure if he should, if there are enough fish left to make a living. Peter wants to give it one more try, for his own sake, as well as his father's.
I love my job. There's no problem getting up in the morning and look forward to it. It's something different every day. Trap fishing lives. The new generation's taking over.
So a new generation is giving it a shot. But the work itself, all the preparation before fishing can even start, is old, hard, and repetitive.
Husk that tree, Bowie. This is middle ground trap. 30 feet deep, re-dipped.
But when it comes to trap fishing, the nature of the work doesn't change from the first year in it to the last year you're in it, except for the gradual refinements that go along with, say, handling the fish, with putting a little power to where you formerly used manual labor.
Melting these leads. These are old leads that have been crimped. We're melting them down to make some new ones. Like this one here. We run the line through them. And this weights the line down to the bottom. So as we're replacing gear with new gear, we need to replace some lead lines. That's what we're doing.
Seth, are there enough fish? No, there aren't. We have mackerel. We have no scup, no squid, no butters. For many, 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 many years before 1980, this outfit with 4 of these, which is what each one of us has, my particular outfit, as was Fred's habit, caught scup, and we did 150 to 250,000 pounds a year, which may sound like a lot, but when you think that we're the corn farmers of Nantucket Sound.
Trap fishermen as family farmers, and like family farmers, facing hard times. But there was a time when trap fishing dominated the coast and drove the economy of places like Provincetown, at the very tip of Cape Cod. The traps turned a town known more as an artist colony, and now as a tourist destination, into a community fish factory.
You know, when you think of Provincetown as anything but a factory town, you think of windy spaces and wild open harbors, and everything is nothing to do with the very conception you have of it. But there was a factory town here, and it was a factory of fish, and the mining was fish, and people went out and caught it and brought it in. And in the early days, the fish were tremendous here, but part of the problem always is, if you catch a lot of fish, what do you do with it? The essential thing you did in the early days was to cut it apart, salt it. So the biggest thing we had here, I suppose they were factories too, you had salt mills. Somewhere around 1875, 1880, they discovered a technique of compressing ammonia gas. That made the change. Now you could build these enormous places where fish could be brought in by huge amounts, and they could freeze it into blocks of ice. To handle this volume of fish, they had to go to a place that could deal with it. So you had these factories ashore, and it required hundreds of people available, because the fish would arrive in vast quantities, and with these gondolas, they'd lift it up. That's what they were gondolas with fish in them. And they were hauled to the top of what they used to call cold storages. primarily that fish was used as bait. It was taken up by the schooners and the other vessels that fished offshore as a way of having basically fresh bait.
Each trap would hire 5 persons, and then you had the people on the wharf that would unload your fish for you. You'd come into the pier and take it out there. Unless the tide was right, then you go to the cold storage and put it right in there.
The logic was very simple for catching fish. Fish would follow the curve of the land. They would hit an obstruction. When they hit the obstruction, they never turned towards the land because that would be death. They turned out to sea. And knowing that, they would take and build a bowl, a circle of poles, and they would hang a net that created a bowl, and the fish would swim into the bowl.
Every time we came in, it would be about, well, close to 20,000 pounds of fish in that boat. We'd load it down till well, some days if we got caught with wind, we had to put the cover on so we wouldn't sink. That's how much fish would be in these boats.
They'd close the gate by lifting a piece of net in place, and then they would proceed to gather up one side of it until they trapped all the fish in a very narrow section of it. And then they would have these sort of dip nets that they used. Took 2 men sometimes on a huge 20-foot long unit, and they'd dip it down into the fish, and a winch would grab a hold of it, lift it up in the air, and they'd swing it aboard, and the guy would pull a chain on it, would open it up and dump the fish in the boat. And they would do this until the boat was literally teeming with fish.
I was fishing with Ernie Tasher and his crew. The traps belonged to Joe Oliver, and these traps were down at near where the hopper is now. And there was a lot of tuna running that day around. And we went in there and we kept one trap and we kept pulling, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was 44. Well, we took out 44 fish out of that one trap, and these are 700-800 pounders. You know what I mean? And I was there with my mouth wide open and looking and saying, "You must be dreaming."
I had a great time with my father once. I was going to have an eye operation. I think I was about 12, and it was early in September, and he came home from work, and the tide happened to be high, and we went out of the paddock, just the 2 of us, and went out in the bay, and there were the tuna, and we chased them into the trap. I think it was an inshore trap, and shut the gate, and whenever he told that story, it was always the most fish they'd ever gotten was that time. It was pretty neat.
I always say, like going open surprise packages when you're going to traps, because you don't know what you're going to get, you know.
And this is fixed gear. We cannot move these. Of course, that's what was the strength of it. The strength of this kind of fishing was that it was fixed. We couldn't hunt. Many, many, many times. Most years, if you have 4 of these, one's a loser. One's a complete why bother even haul the thing? Because that year the fish aren't there. Here, we'll just use whatever we can to hold them in the right spot. I would say for the last 10 years, it has been in a steep decline, so much so that in the last 3 years, I've only caught 350 pounds a year. And I have no restrictions. I could have caught as much as I wanted. They just aren't there.
Then it became, financially, it was the expenses of the poles and the nets and the fuel got to be greater and greater, and the profits of the fish were diminishing. There was a lot of different factors like that, and then the business of the land becoming valuable, which kills you.
Okay, here we go, son. Hey, there they go. There's a handful of mackerel in there. There's a handful of squid.
So the fish are fewer, and sometimes, ironically enough, the fish that do show up won't fetch a price at any market. One more beauty of the traps is that these fish can be released alive, not killed for no good reason.
We're gonna let them swim. free. Live again.
How come?
Because we don't need these fish. They're bait. We have enough bait orders. Cast off the line there, Ralph.
Meanwhile, land values have skyrocketed. Even the old ice houses have now become expensive condominiums. But Mark is hanging in there, and Peter is hanging with him.
Just the love of the business. Part of it, I think, was working with my father. The other part is just the charm and the spirituality and the adventure of the trapping, which I grew up doing.
We are an anachronism. In 1997, what an anachronism is, we sit and wait.
You can see what's happening, right?
It didn't do any damage. It was just stationary there for, well, probably 8 months of the year. And the only time we disturbed that bottom, we pumped that pole down that for that 2 or 3 minutes. It used a hydraulic jet with a pipe and pumped it down to 6 to 8 feet. You couldn't put it down anymore. If you put it down anymore, then you couldn't get it up.
As Louis Cadero says, every night in this fishing operation, it's flat-ass calm. Because you're home in bed. Not too tight, Pete. We're pulling that pole over. Nice and easy. I'm proud of the way we go fishing because now in 1998, the strength of this kind of fishing is that it's very compatible with the environment. And you would think that because it existed on the Rhode Island, Massachusetts coastline from about 1860 to 1990 every year with a variety of catches, but it continued, that you could use the word sustainable.
The beginning of the season, the moment of truth, the time to find out whether the ways of the past can still make sense and make a living in the present.
Right over there by the pole with the light on it, you can see the foam up there, and it's kind of spiraling in a circle. That means the whirlpool. Bunch of mackerel.
You can see them now. Look at those places.
Double whirlpool. Triple whirlpool.
One more time. Okay, drive up. In Chatham, they started right after the Civil War.
I think there was a technique basically learned from the American Indians?
Yes, and elsewhere. It's been all over Europe and Egypt, you know, all the way back to the Nile. Variations of it. Okay, we need another man on the rail.
What do you want it for?
Look, we even have a special treat for all your gourmet restaurants. Is there something under this thing? Is there something under here? When I started to trap, there was not one rule. Not one rule. Do anything, go anytime, take as much as you want. And so now, after 30-some years, that's not the case. You can see some of these are marked 42, 44, 42. That's so when we load the boats, we have a specific place we want most of these poles.
Where are you headed this morning, Mark?
We're gonna go to Harwich first. We'll work our way back. Ready, blue? 1, 2, 3. Watch the twine on the other boat. Start ripping it. Still want to cut it back. Cut it around.
A season is made of many hard days. There are times the fish are there, times they aren't. There are fair, flat days and bad storms that keep you home and tear at the gear. Either way, the work continues until, as happens every year, the schools of mackerel or herring, scup or squid leave the waters once again. As they go, Peter Risen looks back and comes to a very reluctant decision. It's not going to work. He's going to stop fishing.
I think it was tough for my dad and I are very close. I think by the time I spent 4 years fishing with him, we had gone through that complete roundabout, growing up as a child, going through what every family goes through to leaving and coming back, and now working with him and being a partner with him. We had our relationship, which had always been close, transformed completely from a father-son type of thing where he needs to raise me for what he needs to do, to I'm raised, he did a good job, and now we're buddies. So I think the hardest part was I'm not going to work with my dad the next day. I guess I'm not 100% decided to stop yet. I don't know if I ever will be. Biggest thing is that for 4 months out of the year, I loved what I was doing. Loved it. Couldn't wait to go to work. Dog tired, but a great feeling. The other 8 months of the year, I just didn't like what I was doing. And it was hard to make a living, and it was just, 4 months were great, and the next 8 weren't.
As the poles were sunk in early spring, now, at the end of the season, they must be pulled. And Peter is on his way, has started a new career.
I am working for a communications company selling high-end bandwidth to pretty large companies. You know, just like fishing.
And Mark has made a decision too. If trap fishing is going to survive, it will need to do so without him. His time is over. This is Mark's last pole, his last trap, his last day on the water and in the business.
Will we succeed? Will the traps continue? I think 50-50 chance that you'll see fish traps here on Cape Cod in the year 2030. It'll be a roll of the dice. A little luck, and they'll still be around. Ultimately, each one of us, in our own way, has to lend some commitment or responsibility to these well-being of these fish.